So we've learned the basics of PowerShell, and now you're wondering, how do you apply what you learned into the real world? Whether that's Azure, Entra ID, Microsoft 365, Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, maybe even Active Directory, Windows servers. Well, I got the course for you. This way, you're not just learning PowerShell deeper, but also learning it in a practical sense that could be applied in the real world. Azure and Entra ID especially are great platforms for this, as what we do on them is not going to cost much, if at all. And they open you up to such a grand scale within their platforms that allows you to do so much. So we will begin interacting with Azure through PowerShell. We'll explore how to navigate Azure using PowerShell commands. We will learn how to interact with resources, how to collect data, and we'll work towards building a simple script that will generate us a report of what's in Azure. That for now will just run on our computer. This will be the staging grounds for what we do in the future. Like taking our scripts and putting them in the cloud so they can run unintended, like you would if you use Azure Automation Runbook. We'll look into storing our scripts in a version control system like GitHub as our repository. We'll also interact with these platforms using REST APIs and learn how APIs work. And of course, we'll be making a whole bunch of scripts. So without further ado, let's begin. Okay, why don't I demo what I have here? I'm just going to log into Azure. Okay, before we jump into PowerShell, I need to kind of set the scene here for what my environment looks like in Azure. So this is a new tenant I basically created for us. And I have a few subscriptions already created. So corporate development, corporate management, and corporate production. The reason why I have multiple subscriptions is because I want to demonstrate how you could navigate through them in PowerShell. But if you only have one, it's fine. Not a problem. So let's just open one and I'll show you what I have inside. What I have in them is a couple of resource groups. So I have this and I have another one. So if I open one of those, I just have a few resources, which are just network security groups. The reason why I chose network security groups, they don't cost anything. They're very simple to make. So everything has tags. Let me just show you one NSG. So it has a tag for cost center, environment short. So this is development subscription, so dev. Owner 1 and owner 2, these are the email or the UPNs of the users who are quote unquote the owners of these resources. This doesn't really matter much in our script today, the owner part at least. But this is something we are going to build scripts around in the future, and I will dive deeper into that. So for now, just add whatever you feel like, doesn't really matter. Okay, so that's our Azure environment. The only other thing I want to highlight is if I go to NSG and I go to its properties, every resource has a resource ID, right? Now, most IDs, whether it's a user ID or even a subscription ID, which is here, those are just GUID. In Azure, you may see that a resource ID starts at the subscription and then it tells you the subscription ID, so it points to a subscription, and then it tells you a resource group and then it points to a resource group name, and then it tells you information on what this resource is. So the provider is a network security group, and then the name of the resource. This is how you can have the same names over and over for a lot of resources in Azure, but this ID makes them unique because either the subscription or the resource group, something else in there has changed the value. But the key thing I want to highlight is it starts at the subscription. I'll explain that later. But yeah, so that is my environment. Pretty straightforward. All right, so next we have my Visual Studio Code. This is a brand new Visual Studio Code I just installed as well. If you've never used Visual Studio Code, I highly recommend it. Don't use PowerShell ISE anymore. That is outdated. It is not updated anymore. And there's so much more features that are in here that once you start really using Visual Studio Code, you'll begin to see why this is the de facto app that everyone uses to write code and script, not just PowerShell. Like other languages that I use, like Terraform, Bash, and a few others. It can all be written here as well. So when you open it, you will see maybe a different screen, but I basically opened a folder here. So what I did is I hit File, hit Open Folder, and I already had a folder created in my C drive called VSC, and I just opened that. There's nothing in here, which is fine, but that's what you see here, the VSC. In here, I'm just going to create a file. So see here, you can create a new file. You can right click as create a new file as well. I'll just call it script1.ps1. Doesn't really matter. And then I have a file here. You can make multiple, you can make subfolders, you can do a whole bunch, right? And over here, as soon as I type that file name, you will see that a area open where we can write our script. Right now, there's nothing in there. That's just what it says generically. But if I hit enter, you can see it's like a text field, right? Or what just happened, that was this IntelliSense. Speaking of, another beautiful feature about Visual Studio Code is you can install extension. So one thing I installed here when I first got it, I typed the word PowerShell, and then a whole bunch of extensions showed up. I clicked this one. It is by Microsoft.com. And what this does is it gives you all these features, especially IntelliSense, but then also helps you debug and a whole bunch of other things. You can read up on the documentation. But yeah, just make sure you have that installed. It makes your life a lot easier. Other than that, I also downloaded a theme. Another beautiful thing about Visual Studio Code is that you can set your themes. So I downloaded this GitHub theme one. And then when I click set theme, it gives me all these choices. So if I want something brighter, you know, I can have it like this. If I want something darker, I can have something like this. And it just gives you a different font and color scheme for all your code. So play around, see what you like. And then lastly, the other thing I want to mention about Visual Studio Code before we start is all the shortcuts and capabilities that it adds that you otherwise would not have in many of the other, what would you call it? Code writing things. All right, so let's say hypothetically you had some words, right? Let's literally say you had the word words, right? You can just select the lines that you want to comment out and do Control /. And then it will comment it out based on the language you have selected. So because this is PowerShell, it gave us the number sign, but if it was a different language, it will give you the correct version of that. Another thing you may notice is if I start typing, it kind of gives me a list to select from, right? So that is IntelliSense at work. So I can kind of type and get my Visual Studio Code to kind of assist me so I don't have to type the full thing. So even with stuff like for each, if I run that, you will see like a drop down. If I click the second one, look what it does. It kind of sets up the template of where I got to fill stuff in. Another thing is, let's say I'm just going to uncomment it by doing Control / again on the lines selected that were commented. Let's say I wanted to put quotations around all these words, right? Let me just make sure they're not the same length. So it looks right. So I can kind of demonstrate here. Let's say you want to put a quote in the front and in the end. Another cool feature is you can do Control Alt from the last or the first word and press the up or down key. And then you can move the cursor to multiple lines. So as you can see, I'm in 3 lines right now. If I add the quotes, it will add it to all 3. If I hit the end key and press quotes again, it will do it at the end. And if I need it to be comma separated values, I can just add a comma, press escape to exit, and then just remove the last one. Okay, so let's begin. When you log into Azure, you have to log in, right? I logged in as myself, it connected me to a tenant, and then I was able to navigate my Azure environment. The same is true from PowerShell's perspective. But before we do that, we need to install a module. A module just means that by default, PowerShell has a set list of commands that you can run against it. It doesn't just have everything because not everyone's going to use everything. It only has what the machine needs in order to operate and the basic functionalities and all the features that come with PowerShell by default. So if you want to extend that to access other services, that's where modules come in. And it's not just for Azure. You want it to interact with Linux. we want to interact with AWS, we want to interact with Excel, right? Modify Excel documents. You can do that, but you'll need modules to do so. Well, the command for that is called install module, right? But what is the module? If you don't know, I mean, I know, but let's just say you didn't know, right? You just go to Google and say Azure module PowerShell. Ideally, you want to find this site right here. This is called PowerShell Gallery. This is like, I don't know if you ever use Python, like Python official libraries. Like all the PowerShell modules, they're all uploaded and published here that people can download from. You can also create your own modules if you like, but when I open here, you will see the word AZ. So AZ is the module that we're using. And then it will tell you the command you need to run to download it. We don't need the required version part. We can just do this. It will install the latest. And if I scroll down, it gives you some information on all the different versions. So you can click them and see, you know, the updates and what changed, etc. Get all the history of that. There's also package details. So what's interesting about Azure is, so rather than having Azure be one monolithic module, it has all these little parts that comb together to make the module. And the reason for this is, let's say you have a container, and that container deploys stuff when it runs, and when it runs, it's basically like a fresh computer. Maybe you don't need to install the whole AZ module on that container. Maybe you just need one part or another part. This allows you to break it down. So like, for example, if I just want to do install module az.accounts to just get the account module related cmdlets, I can do that. But since we're going to use everything, doesn't really matter. We'll just do install module name az. I'm just going to go back to our screen and just type this here. And then you just, also down here, we have the terminal. So this is no different than when you open PowerShell on your computer. And it shows you that screen that you're probably familiar with, the screen, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna do the install module. I'm gonna add the word force because I don't want to hit accept on anything. I hit that, and we wait. It will take however long it takes. Instead of watching paint dry, we'll just flash forward. Okay. So a module is installed. I'm just going to comment out with Control/. Now, in order to access Azure, what you do is you sign in. And when you sign in, you're connected to your tenant. Same is true when you're in PowerShell. So now that we have the module, we'll need to run a command called connect AZ account. This is the command we'll use to log into Azure. It is no different than us signing in. By providing in no other fields like service principal or managed identity or any of the other kinds of identities, which we will discuss in another video. This will basically prompt us to sign in. So I'm just going to hit it, connect to AZ account, and notice what happened. The browser opened, asking me to log in. I'm already signed in, so I did this. I just clicked this, it says authentication complete. You can return to the application. So we'll do that, and we're back, and notice something came up here. So over here, it's basically asking us to select our tenant and our subscription. Since I only have one tenant, that's the only one we see here, but I have multiple subscriptions we saw earlier. I had the management, production, and development subscriptions, right? Whenever you connect to Azure in PowerShell, you always have to be in the context of a subscription within a tenant. It is never without. It doesn't really matter what we connect to. If you can see here, the first column just says number 1, 2, 3. You just type any of those numbers in the prompt and hit enter, and then you're connected to it. If you want to skip this, especially for automations where you don't want a prompt sitting somewhere, you can provide a subscription, and the name could be the same one that we have. And if you connect with this, by the way, I don't have to copy and paste it down here. Because I have nothing else uncommented, I can press F5, that will just run the whole script. Or I can select a line or a couple of them and press this, which is F8, and then that will run just the line I've highlighted. So I'll press F8, and look, it popped up to sign in again. I selected to sign in, But if we go back, it didn't have this prompt, right? So we were able to directly connect to our subscription. Now, just because you're connected to a subscription doesn't mean you cannot switch to other subscriptions, especially when you're automating and going through different ones to collect data, which leads to the next point. When you're connected to a subscription, any command you run against Azure now will be within the context of that subscription, provided the commands you're running are something that happens within a subscription. So like if you're going to collect information on resources, it's only going to give you the resources that are in corporate development in our example. So why don't we explore that next? I mean, I already know the command. It's get AZ resource. I've done this for a long time, so I'm kind of used to this now. But say you didn't know, right? Is it your job to memorize Cmdlets and know all the noun-verb combos? Or verb-noun combos? No, don't do that. There's better things to practice and learn. This just happened because I've done it so many times, but it was never my intention to memorize these things. And the reason for that is there's many ways for you to get to the command. One is how I showed you earlier, which is you can just go to Google and say how to get blah, blah, blah in Azure, right? So how to get resources in Azure. It'll give you that. Now that we have ChatGPT, you can also ask it that. The classic way that you're probably taught a lot in like when you're learning PowerShell is to use commands like get command, right? So why don't we just kind of highlight that just to kind of go through it, right? So get command is a command that basically says that whatever I give you, if I give you anything, give me commands of that, right? I can type a module's name, will give me all the commands of the module. I can give it a module's name and then give it wildcard word wildcard, and it'll give me anything that has that word that I search, right? So why don't we try that? Get command module wildcard. And on it goes, okay? Quite a lot. And they're all within all these different sub I forget the word they call it, but I just call it submodules, right? So all these submodules within AZ, here are all the commands that it has, okay? It's quite a list, so it doesn't really help us when we're trying to get a certain kind. It's so long that you can't even scroll up anymore, right? Okay, so let's narrow this down a little. All right, so I know it's get command module AZ asterisk. I know the name is going to be get. What am I getting? Most likely AZ something. Maybe let's try this. Still too long. Okay, so what is an AZ module that I'm looking for? Resources? Okay, let's try res. Okay, there's a whole bunch, right? I'm not sure which one's the correct one. What we can do is say get help. So this is piping right here. This is saying whatever values we collect from this, I want you to pipe it to another thing, which in our case is get help, which gives you more data on what all these commands are. So if I type that, it's probably going to be way too much information, but let's see how it goes. And there it is. All right, and if I scroll up, it's just endless walls of text. Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's pipe again. Select object, meaning within get help, all the data that you're giving back, just give me some elements of it. I usually just type this. And I did spell it right. DSCRIP. Okay. All right, so resource names and then a description. Ignore all the squigglies. Let's just look at what's in here. Get AZ resource command like gets Azure resource. Perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. Cool. So why don't we actually let's double check. Maybe you want to get more information on it. Now that we know the name, just search that particular command, get information of it. Cool. Usually when it comes to learning more about a resource, I just go online. These days, internet's right there, right? So it's not that bad. Okay, so get easy resource. That's our command. Why don't we run that? Cool. It gave us a whole bunch of information on stuff. And as you can see here, they're all NSGs. Let's make it a little bit more clean. Let's do piping. Select object. These are the different objects that we can select. I'll say name. So it'll only give me the list of names. And here it is. I know it's repeating, but if we go back to my tenant, development, click resources, I have the same names repeating because they're actually in different resource groups. Remember I told you about resource ID, right? You can have the same names, but because the ID is different, it doesn't really matter because the ID is what the reference is for each unique item in your tenant. Okay, so I have all these NSGs and I'm able to collect information on them. Great. But this is only for corpo development. How do we go to another subscription? We just run this again. Say production. No, we don't do that. This is just to connect into Azure. We're already signed in. We don't need to re-sign in over and over just to go to subscription. Another command for this is called set AZ context. Again, you can just Google whenever you're not sure how to change your subscription in Azure PowerShell. It will guide you to the right direction. The set AZ context is the command. Just to put it in perspective, what is get AZ context even give you? This is who I am. This is the subscription I'm in, right? So if I do set AZ context and I say, so why don't we type this, corpo production, and enter. And look at that, we've switched. How do we know this? If I press up on the arrows, go back to my get AZ resource, I got a whole bunch of NSGs, but these are all the prod ones. So these are the NSGs that are in the prod subscription, right? The same thing if I go to management, to get AZ resource, it's all the NSGs plus, ignore that for now, but yeah, so these are the resources showing. Cool. All right, so now that we know how to navigate and understand the basics of PowerShell commands, let's start making a script. Let's say the bosses are like, hey, I need a list of every resource in our organization that is in Azure. Okay, cool, easy. Let's say we want to basically collect subscription name, resource group, resource itself, region, and then the tags, and we want to put it in a nice CSV file. In order to get the CSV file, first need to collect our data, and let's get it right up to the point where we're ready to export, and I'll show you how to export it as a CSV. And then maybe we'll even look at how to export it to Excel directly as a table. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to basically collect all the data. In order to collect, you just basically store in a variable, right? So if I say resources equals get AZ resource, move all this. I'm going to uncomment this. And I run this, nothing happens, but if I type the word resources, all my data is saved, right? And let's say from this list, we don't need this, we don't need resource ID, they only need a few values. So why don't we say select object, name, resource group name, location. And by the way, you don't type this whole thing. If I type RE something, it will show up all the objects that are part of associated with it. Okay, resource group name. Base, tell me a whole bunch. I can just start typing. Location. Tags. Yep, shows up. Just to make it look, we'll make cap. Okay. And if I run this, it looks a little bit cleaner. This is just a different format, by the way. I don't know if you ever, if I the command at the end of it and write format list, it's going to give it in the list view. If I do format table, it's going to give it in table view. Sometimes it does list when the table is just way too long, because as you can see, it's starting to cut out. But yeah, either way, it doesn't matter. While we're at it, let me show you something else. There's another view, out grid. Do not remember. Out grid, or out grid view. Okay, all right. Out grid view. Something just popped up on my other screen. I'll just bring it over and look at that. So if you don't have Excel on your computer and you just want to see it in a table format, you can always use this. Pretty neat. I just have Excel, so I'll demo that anyways. But yeah, if you're just quickly looking to see how your tables look and you need to just play around with it, there's a lot more, and you can filter, search, and do a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, I don't know. Okay, well, going back, so this is our command. Resource equals da 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 da. Just clear the screen like this. Have our resources, but it's only for management. We want to get all of them, every subscription. So what do we do here? So we know there's a command called set az context, and we just need to provide a subname, and it will switch over, and then we can add to the resources. So what we really want to do is collect the names of the subscription, right? So if you do get, and again, you can Google this, how to get subscription names in your tenant and using PowerShell, give you this command. When you run it, it gives you all the subscriptions in your tenant. Get az subscription, but I only want the name. So let's just make sure we get the right part. Subscription, again, oh, like that. And dot name, I'll give you, that's one way. Another way is, of course, select objects. Name. The problem is this gives the part name, so what you have to do is exclude property name. I think that's how it is. No. Sorry. The other one. To exclude and property name. This name. And then there. So that's the same as doing this. I just prefer this, so I'm going to stick with it. Okay. And then what we'll do is put the word subs, the S in front of it. And what we want to do is loop through each one and then set the context and get the reason. Here comes first loop for each. For each sub in sub. Dump this here. And nicely. Say sub. Now will this work? Let's see. I'm pretty quick. Almost like I didn't run sub, so let's try again. Okay, so when you switch context, you may recall that this popped up, and because it went to the next one, the next time put up in the next. I don't want to see this. I'm not interested. So we can just do out null. This just means give me no output for whatever you're doing, right? So if I run it again, you should see nothing because resources is just being stored as a variable. Problem is, resources is not going to have everything. And the reason is we're not adding to it. We're overwriting it, right? So what we need to do is combine everything. One way to do this, got a plus here. Now if you run it, let me just put this at the end. Format. So instead of typing format table, there's a lot of aliases. FT. Format table. So I can just have this run at the end to give us a list. Great. Okay, it's a lot bigger, but here's a problem. Here's prod. here's prod again. The reason is when I ran this, I already had values stored in resources, and this was adding to it rather than replacing it. So if I run this again, it's just going to double the size. Right, so now we have prod, roll up, another prod. We don't want that. That's bad, right? So what we really want to do is initialize the variable as nothing. The best way to do it is, well, one way is null. But I'm going to assign it as an array. It's going to be an array of objects. Now if I run it, perfect. All of our subscription. Except for the fact that I would really like the word, I would really like a table column to have the subscription as well. Problem is, GetAZ resource doesn't have it. Right? Really want it to have it here. So what can we do? We can do something called calculator property. I'm just gonna go down a weird angle here, but bear with me if you've never done this before. Pretty cool feature. So these are all properties that we're pulling in from GetAZ resource. What if you want to pull something that's not from it? Or you just want to do some kind of calculations against it and store that value, right? You just want to have like whatever it is your heart desires. That's what calculator properties are. So you basically give it a name label, and then you give it a calculation that determines what the value is going to be, and that's what it's going to store. So what we really want in here is basically sub, or I should say sub, right? Because if I run the word sub, that's the name, right? But each time it's running, depending on which loop it is in, it's going to have the correct subscription name. So might as well just throw that in here, right? The way to do that is, like I said, a name label, as in what this sections we call, like this one's called name resource group. We want one to be called subscription. And then the calculated property what do you call it? Expression. And in that, we're just going to put the word sub. We're not going to really calculate anything. We're just going to say inject this kind of thing. So how you do that is pretty interesting. So you basically do the at with the curly braces, and then you say name as in the label, and then in quotes you can write sub. You can write anything. I'm just going to write the word subscription, and then after that you do semicolon. Oh, you do it within the curly brackets. Put a space. Write the word expression. And as you can see, as I was typing it, it was just already kind of guiding me. Equals. And now we're injecting some kind of command in here. So we're going to put the curly brackets again. And in here, we'll type sub. And we can remove this part right here. Okay. So now if I run it, process. Right after name, it should have a section called subscription. So that's fine and dandy, works. But I'll be honest, using this format with this isn't the most efficient way of collecting data. It's okay for our case because our case is so small. But the problem is every time you're running this, what it does is basically every time this line is run and it's doing this add, it's just creating a new list and adding to it. The next time it's creating another list with all the previous data and adding this new data to it. And on and on and on. It's just not very efficient. What we really want is something that can append and remove, because you can also remove lines, right? That can add and remove from an existing list without recreating it every time it runs, kind of thing. And for that, what we have is something from .NET, actually. They're called system collections. The particular one we're looking at is called GenericLists, and what we're going to inject in it are objects. Select object, these are all objects, right? So how do we do that is basically, instead of saving resources like this, what you do is resources equals new object. system dot dot generic list. And then in square brackets, we write PS custom object just to say that in this list, you don't have to put this, but basically saying that whatever is in this list, expect it to be an object. Can't put string, can't put that, can't put collection of data. Okay. And then what we're going to do, we're still going to run this. Let's take this sub out. We don't actually, this will be a lot cleaner to write. It takes a little getting used to if you've never done it before. We're going to say, yeah, okay, get all the resources like you did, but now we're going to do a for each resource in resources. In fact, I'm going to change this because it's the same word. We're going to say data object, data collect. I like camels. First word lowercase. All right, so for each resource in resources, what we're going to do is say, I want you, for each resource, add it to this collection. How that works is you basically say data collected, the one that we had here, that we created as an object, add method, so this is a method, and type the word PS custom object once again. What we do is at, again, you don't need this, up to you. Definitely just do that. Maybe we'll just do that to make it clean. Name equals resource, right? Going through each. Okay, so let me just explain what I'm going to do here. I'm basically going to make my table. So what I'm doing is I'm setting all the column names and I'm setting all the row names that are going to be added to that column. So for the name column, we're going to do resource dot name. Because if I run the word resource, probably won't work, but let's do resources and run only one item. So this is how you'd run one item in an array, right? So if I want to go to the second item, I'm going to do this, 3. Let's just do 0. So this is basically what's going to be in resource. It's going to be name, subscription. Actually, not going to be subscription. We just took that out. Name, resource group, name, location, tag, right? So I want to store name in this new collection I'm making, and I want it to be the resource name. Same thing is going to happen here when I do resource. Let's call it RG. Let's switch it up. We don't need to write resource group name. Or you know what? Let's just call it resource group without the name part. And say resource dot resource group name. Location, let's call it region. Nicer to read. Resource dot location. Then let's do tags equals resource dot tag. And you know what? I want to switch this around a little. I want to make this second. First thing I want to make is actually subscription equals sub. And there it is. We run this now. We run this now, F8. It's the same thing as before. Okay, only problem is I didn't run, I just ran resource at the end. Let's just try this, a format table. Okay, it's looking all weird. Guess I did have to add that. Yeah. Okay. Add. What are we adding? Adding PS custom object. Oh wait. Always tricky. I usually copy and paste this at this point, so don't really remember. Okay, it's fine. If I do that, run that, and there it is. Right, all of our objects. Format. table. There it is. Our subscription, resource group, name, region, tags, just like how you want it. Great. Basically have our data, right? This is what we want to hand over to our senior. Now, how do we export it to CSV? It's actually built in already. Export CSV. We'll say C drive. You know what? Why don't we just do it here? All right. Let's just do that. Say resources. Okay, and look, it created it. Where? Okay, and then here we go. We have our data. Okay, but see something about tag. Right, like. Okay, so what's going on here? Everything else is fine. Okay, let's go back. Something I wanted to highlight. Okay, so if you notice when we run data collected, everything is coming out as a string, which is great. Excel, strings, bring it on. Numbers, bring it on. But objects, arrays, yeah, it's gonna freak out, especially when it's dictionary lists, which is what this is. So let's try this. Let's say we go to, let's go to resource. That should be run one. So resource should actually, with dotNET should be something, right? Now let's go to tag. And you notice, as soon as I open dot tags, right? Because you can select dot name to get the name, a resource group and all that. When I open tags like this, key value pairs. If I do get type, open and close bracket, tells you what kind of data it is, and within dot tags, it's a dictionary, meaning key value, also known as HashTables. If I, for example, did it to name, string, which, like I said, Excel is fine with. Integers, fine, but dictionaries, not so much. All right. So how do we navigate through the keys and the values? Like, how do I get this value? How do I get this value? How do I get this value? Right? Because if I can just get to those values, maybe I can convert it to a string. Okay, so normally when we're working with stuff, we just use an array like this, right? 3, 4. We just got different resources, right? This did exist, okay. But we just went through the different numeric values, right? So maybe we can do that. So let's go to resource.tags, 0, nothing. 1, nothing. 2, nothing. Okay, obviously there's nothing, so let's not keep going. So how do we go through key value pairs? Kind of interesting is that instead of it being a numeric value, you actually have to give it the key to get the value. The dot, if I do in quotes, I'm doing quotes because sometimes there's like weird formatting issues with using special characters. But if it was just like owner 1 or 2, it should be fine. If I type this, it gives me 001. So that's how you get this value. If to demonstrate without the quotes, if I do owner 1, it gives you this value, right? I think this won't work. See? Of minus sign, the dash. So if you have in quotes, it's not going to read it as something else. So it's a good habit. Whenever you're working with tags, just put in quotes. Owner 1, right? Okay, so at least that's how we can get values. We don't want to create a Mickey Mouse scheme of just writing some manual task here to collect it all, right? Like we could type something like owner 1, comma owner 2, or something. Obviously it's not gonna work. We're gonna have to do like some plus something. with the little space in the middle. Like, is this how we're gonna do this, right? Um, that will display both names. Okay, well that's not it. I need to say owner one, right? So we'll say owner one plus, right? So this is how we could write it, but that's a string, by the way. But the problem is, what if I don't know what the tags are? And what if they're dynamic, they change or something? I don't want to hard code the keys here and then have issues later down the road. So how could I cycle through all the keys and the values and get that data and store it here? Okay, so if you want to get tags, the key to getting tags in this scenario is to use something called getEnumerator. So if I have resource.tags like this, right? And I can, after that, add a method called getEnumerator. And then I can close that bracket that opens with it. If I run it, it doesn't look that different. But what it really allows us to do now is to use for each against it. For each object, a different kind of for each. So rather than doing for each something and somethings, what we can say is for each this, we could write it like that. We can say, let's just put in text, like a write output, is basically what it means. Dot key. I run this, get all the keys. Basically what this means is, you know how we have resources in resource? So in this case, this would be resource if it was written like that. Okay, so key works like that. That's cool. What about within the same string, I put space. I say, okay, give me value. And I run that. Okay, it's writing it. Okay. I just want to make it a little more clean and readable. Okay, cool. We have a little thing in the middle. Why don't we put this in quotes to really highlight that this is one item? Okay, so this is one, this is another, this is another, but it's still an array, right? So this is 1 item, 2 item, 3 item, 4 item. We want it to all be a single item. So what we can do is use another method called join, and we can say join each item in the array and join them with commas, space. If I run it now, we're just gonna get oh, okay. The join needs to be, what are we joining? We're joining everything that's happening in here. So I'll put in quotes, space, join, and then I'm typing how I want it to join with a comma and a space. Now if I run it, single line. And I'm going to copy this here. Now let's see what happens if we run this. I'm just going to close this file, overwrite it. Excel open. Good. Format as table, my table as headers. And there it is. We were able to get a dictionary and turn it into a string. Right? Cost center equals this. And we environment short, owner, blah, blah. Right? Cool. Kind of mixed up our order, but that's fine. I don't really care that much. So that is, in essence, how we can build a report. Obviously, you don't want to make a CSV and then convert it to a table and do all that. So we talked a little bit about modules earlier. So I want to install another module. And what this is going to do is just give us another module where we can basically edit Excel files. So what I can do now is instead of doing export, we can say export Excel. And then we can do the same thing. I'll show you some of the switches here. The path is the same, right? We have this. But then we have additional things. Like we can say worksheet name, I guess. Doesn't really matter. I'm looking more for table name and say data. Then let's say table style. And I want to do light 10. Sure. All right, well, make sure it's not called CSV. Called XLS. Okay, so that's cool. Look, I set it to auto size so it fits all the words. I set it to table 10, which I just knew is this table. If you highlight any of these tables, you see light 10, right? So set that light 10 there, and when I was looking for the options in table style, I pressed Control Space, gave you a whole bunch of options, and one of them was called light 10. I selected that. That was it. All right, so that covers today's lesson. We demoed how to navigate Azure, how to collect information from Azure using PowerShell, and as well as make a simple script, right? Our next goal would be, okay, we have a script. How do we upload it into Azure so that we can run it from Azure and not locally on our computer? So we'll dive more into Azure automation account, how to run runbooks, and go from there. All right, see you in the next one.